Alright, YouTube. I was asked my opinion on the nation of Israel. I figured I'd make a video about it. I've had videos before on the subject, but I haven't left them on for long. Usually they're just essentially troll bait. This time I'll probably put comments to approval only, just because, I mean, this one issue, above almost all others, causes people to completely flip out. You've got one side of the coin saying Israel's this terrible, fascist state and oppresses the Palestinians, who are completely innocent, and on the other side you've got, of course, the people saying these Palestinians are bloody butchers and constantly shooting rockets into Israel, and so it never gets anywhere. People will debate it till they're blue in the mouth, blue in the face, that is. They'll debate it for hours, literally. They love to do so. They never come to any conclusions. My thoughts on Israel. I think Israel, there are two sides to the coin that I'd like to address. On the one hand, the Israeli government is clearly run by Jewish fascists. Now, I don't extend this to the, David Icke sort of Alex Jones level and say, well, the Jewish lobbies are trying to take over the world. I think that's absolute nonsense. But it's clear the nation of Israel is run primarily by Zionists. I don't think they have power elsewhere except through lobbying, but it's clear that they run Israel. Of course, you've got several groups in Israel who, somewhat in dubious legal terms, have been stripping Palestinians of their land, resettling Jews on that land, around Jerusalem mainly. They're essentially attempting to make Jerusalem purely Jewish. I can understand their concern for a split state where they've got Jewish individuals and Muslim individuals. My point is, it smacks of fascism to deliberately exclude the Muslims, and in some case even the Christians, which I find hilarious, since most Christians in this country love the nation of Israel and say they're God's chosen Jewish people, they're perfect, anyone who attacks Israel, we'd better destroy them and turn them into a parking lot. Yet Christians in Israel do face discrimination the same way the Muslims do. I find that quite odd that they choose to support them so much. But on the other hand, I can understand in one way where the Jewish people's rage is coming from. See, I don't blame the Jewish people, and I've never had a problem with Jews. I've never had Jews, for the most part, be particularly interested in converting me or converting anybody else. They seem rather passive, actually, and certainly compared to Christians and Muslims, although they adopt similar customs in some ways, they're much more passive about it. They don't go around in the streets saying, let's hang the gays, let's hang the abortionists, let's go to war against this country or that country over there. You just don't see them doing that. Now, I understand in the West it's primarily liberal Jews that settled here. In Israel you have a mix. You have Zionists, they're sort of extreme Israelite nationalists. You have the Orthodox Jews, sort of the, we should remain in the Jewish customs, and then you have the liberal Jews, the academics and, most of the lay people. So you got these three totally different groups. I think people's problem is they lump them all into one group and say, Jews. Well, which kind of Jew are you talking about? Because they're totally different paths. They're Jewish occultists that practice almost a left-hand path Eastern tradition, which is totally out of sync with the rest of Jewish tradition. So I support Israel in the way and mind of I support their people's right to exist. I support their right to run a country as well. What I don't support is the Zionist occupation of Israel. When you look at, and I have actually talked with Jews from Israel, I won't name them because the Jews who do run Israel, the Zionists, are known for using various terrorist tactics against their own people to shut them up. I have spoken with people in Israel, actual practicing Jews in Israel, both Orthodox and liberal, by the way. I've never spoken to a Zionist before. They probably wouldn't lower themselves to speak with a Goyim like me. They don't like the government of Israel either. Their problem with the government of Israel is primarily that they see it as corrupt and fascist. They don't necessarily care about the fact that they're bombing Palestinian civilians, but they don't support the fascism that they see in their government. I mean, look at it this way. I've got my YouTube channel, right? It's censored in Israel. Israelis can't see, no Israeli will see this video unless they use some sort of bypassing system to get to the video. They'll have to use a proxy or something from some other country. That's the only way they can view it. Why? Because the Israeli government doesn't like its people getting access to outside information about the world. And it's literally the same thing that you see in other countries that practice censorship. You get a fascist group in power. They put up a wall of censorship, both of their own people and of information coming out of their country that gets to other people. The difference is this. The Jewish lobby in the Western world is very powerful. The Muslim lobbies are not very powerful. So when we talk about Iran, which also, by the way, censors its people, and I've had more Iranians lately watching my videos than Israelis, which is rather sad, we see Iran for what it really is. We see it as a fascist regime run by a dictator who's, now it's more an oligarchy at this point because he's losing power and credibility as well. But you see the censorship and you see the brutality for what it is, and you see the homegrown terrorism and all the other aspects of Iran. You don't see that with Israel. Most Americans see Israel as this shining light of democracy in the middle of all these barbarian Middle Eastern states. That's simply not the way that it works. That's not true in any way, shape, or form. Having spoken to people in Israel, which have a hard time seeing any of my content, and primarily through Facebook would connect with me, these individuals have told me, yes, the government of Israel is fascist. And it's fascist against the Jews as much as it is the Muslims. It runs the Muslims through extra hoops because it assumes that they're terrorists. But it stifles the free speech of the Jewish people. If I'm a Jew in Israel, and I'm trying to speak out against the government of Israel to a Western audience, I'm probably going to have the police knocking on my door. Whereas if I'm a Muslim in Israel trying to do the same thing, they'll probably just shoot me. If I'm a Jew, they'll just send the police to rough me up a bit. That's the way their government works. But I will say this, the Palestinian groups like Hamas are no better. They're exactly the same. I see it as a war of two turds. I see 99% of the Jewish people and 99% of the Palestinian people just want to friggin' live. They want to go to work. They want to raise a family. They want to do, normal human things. They just want to exist. Then the 1%ers, the people who are in charge, for instance Hamas, they get all sorts of missiles and terrorist backing from other groups, and they want a hardcore Islamic state in the area. The Zionists are the flip side. They want the same thing, only they want a hardcore Zionist state in the area. You've got two racist governments fighting one another for the same land. Neither of them represent their people. Neither of them are legitimate governing forces because it's dubious as to how the Zionists and Hamas got into power in the first place. It's clear that they're not popular regimes. Yet people in the West don't understand this. People in the West say one of two things. They either say the Palestinians are all terrible people and those great Jews that are, shining light of democracy, which is a complete lie. Or they say, oh, those terrible bloodthirsty Jews always beating up these innocent Palestinians. That's also not true because, again, 99% of those people don't care whether the Palestinians are in their country. Primarily what you see a few rich land developers, old political money from Europe that went to Israel. By the way, the leadership of Israel ties to European groups, not so much to actual Jewish groups. You have all these problems. You've got the money and the power concentrated in the hands of the few, and you've got two feuding tyrant states. And each one of them is trying to carve off a piece of the pie. The Jews, the Zionists, the government of Israel, does this by appealing to primarily the United States. We've got a lot of evangelical Christians here who wouldn't care who is running Israel. The Antichrist could be running Israel and they would still send them billions of dollars a year. You've got certain groups around the Middle East. You've got definitely the Russians. You've got, the Iranians and other groups that may not have the same goals, but they all back primarily the Palestinians and constantly want to use their power to censure Israel. The problem being both sides are completely corrupt and don't represent the people. They're primarily disarmed populace, and the worst thing is this. The Zionist government of Israel has convinced a segment of the Jewish population that they're actually legitimate in their claims that the Palestinians are these evil, bloodthirsty barbarians. A segment of the Palestinian population has actually been convinced by Hamas that the Jews are the same thing. That's why they're fighting constantly. That's kind of self-explanatory. But nobody in the West sees it for what it really is. They either side with Israel or they side with Palestine. I don't care. As far as I'm concerned, the two governments should wipe one another out, and then the Palestinians and the Jews should join hands and form their own actual democratic state without A, Zionist law, or B, Sharia law. But that's not going to be the case. Eventually, one side will probably end up committing genocide against the other. Unfortunately, that seems likely. But I don't have a problem with Jews. I don't even really have a problem with Muslims. I hate Islam, the actual religion, but most of the Muslims I've talked to that aren't merely convert-seeking are fairly good people. The same goes for the Jews. So that's my thoughts on Israel, and that is the truth about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that most people will ignore. Peace out.